You knew what I meant. It's a big deal. Part 4. Good God, I hope I can get this thing done in 4. Okay. Then we get to the next argument, which is she has a separate claim for failure to investigate sexual harassment allegations. And they mainly say 2 things. This one's a really quick in and out. Number 1, there were no sexual harassment allegations because the things that she complained about were just the same argument they made about they're not severe or pervasive. Nobody would see those as sexual harassment allegations, so they didn't require a sexual harassment investigation. And if there was one, she waived it when she sent us that 17-point document, and her lawyer said, we'll do this instead of having a full HR investigation. We'll see what the other side to that is. They did finally mention Wayfair actually having, and I want to go and read all this later today when I get a chance, like a structure, right? Wayfair had a separate HR department. It had an employee handbook. It had policies. It told people how to report. It was even the hotline for workplace complaints was on the call sheets. Okay, so that's something. Now, I think the argument Lively's going to make is, I was complaining to the people at the top and they didn't do anything. I was complaining about the people at the top to the people at the top. So I'll be interested to see if any of these documents talk about that. But, there's been speculation all along that they didn't have any procedures in place and they didn't do training. And again, I'm going to take a look at them and see how good they are. But it appears that they had something. And then we get to, first of all, can I just tell, hey, TikTok, when you're doing green screen, why can't you put a little colorful bar on the strip of photos you're going to put in the background so that I can tell which one is which? Because I'm not always doing them in order. It's fucking annoying. Anyway, then we get into the contract enforceability. And I did not think through this deeply. I did not anticipate this, but it's a pretty good argument. So the argument they make is, like I said, there was an offer letter that was agreed to, you're going to be this actress in this movie and you're going to get an executive producer credit, whatever. And everybody agreed to that. But it was conditioned upon, right? Your work on this is conditioned upon us entering into a full-scale actor loan-out agreement, which they never did. And they, of course, make the arguments that she didn't want to do it. There were and they say they didn't do it because there was stuff that she wanted to change and they refused. And so they were not at a meeting of the minds, which is critical if you want to argue that an agreement doesn't exist. Now, I think she's still going to make the course of conduct argument, but we'll see what the evidence is. But what they say is, we paid her under the offer letter, but she was never actually under the actor loan-out agreement. And this is important because remember that she has 2 claims, one for breach of the actor loan-out agreement and one for breach of the rider to the loan-out agreement, which is the 17 points. And those are alternative claims under for sexual harassment and retaliation if the Title VII and FEHA claims fall apart. So this is important to look at. So the argument that they make here is, number 1, there wasn't an agreement because there was stuff that we were not on a meeting of the minds on. And number 2, there's a merger clause in it. And a merger clause is it's boilerplate. You've probably seen it a million times and not thought about it. But it is a term in a contract that says this document constitutes the entire agreement between the parties. Basically saying, this is all there is. You cannot go outside of this document to determine what else the relationship was. It has to be here. And that the offer letter? No. The actor loan-out agreement had one. And so if it's not in place, none of that shit matters. So they're basically making the argument that the only thing we possibly could have breached would be the offer letter, but all the terms she's relying on to say we breached aren't in the offer letter. They're in the actor loan-out agreement, and that's not enforceable. They then go on to say that if the actor loan-out agreement is not enforceable, the rider to the actor loan-out agreement can't be enforceable, right? An amendment or an addendum to an unenforceable contract does not exist, right? Which is an argument that I think I've made before, or that somebody has made before. It makes a lot of sense. So it really all depends on that first argument. And then they make an additional argument, and this is, so many of you are so smart and have thought about this and have raised this in comments multiple times about this rider, right? So like if it is a contract, so if you have a rider to an agreement or an addendum to an agreement, you still have to have all the elements of a contract, right? And the elements of a contract under American common law are an offer, acceptance, and consideration. And consideration means every party gets something and every party gives something. Otherwise, it's a gift, right? If you want to have a contract, both parties have to give and both parties have to get. And the argument that they make here is, even if you think that the rider is somehow enforceable because somehow the actor loan out agreement is enforceable, there's no consideration for the rider because all she gave was, I'll continue acting on the project. And under the offer letter, she had no choice. All of her outs for getting out of acting on the project were in the actor loan out agreement that never got signed, which isn't enforceable, that she cannot use. I'll probably have to go more in depth about that because it's a really sticky contract argument, but it makes a lot of sense. They then make an even more interesting argument. There's so many contract arguments. It's fascinating. And by the way, I think for a judge, it's a lot less risky to be like, sorry, this contract just doesn't allow for that, than it is to be, just thinking about him and his, judicial judgment, than it is to be like, you weren't sexually harassed. That wasn't that bad, right? Like he's going to think twice about that, as we would hope that a judge would. But saying like, sorry, the contract just doesn't allow for that is a little bit of an easier thing for him to grab onto and has less risk. One of the things they say is, even if we breach the actor loan out agreement. The actor loan out agreement, even if it's enforceable, and even if you say that we breached it when these comments or whatever happened in May of 2023, the actor loan out agreement has another kind of boilerplate clause in it, which is if there is a breach, the party who says there's been a breach, there's a notice and cure period. So a lot of contracts say this. If one of us breaches this agreement, the person who thinks there's been a breach has to give written notice to the other and say, you have breached this contract and you have 30 days to cure it. And if you don't, I'm out, right? That's in like every mortgage you've ever signed, right? Is a notice and cure provision. And it was in the actor loan out. And they're like, okay, so if that's the case, you never gave the notice. And if you did, we cured it anyway, because it is undisputed that the conduct stopped. So even if that actor loan out agreement is in place, you still have a problem. But this is by far my favorite part of the whole document. This is my favorite. Nerdy, yes, my favorite still. So remember how in the MJOP, they argue that she sued the wrong entity. She sued Wayfarer and not It Ends With Us Movie LLC. She put them in the CRD complaint, and that's where she got the right to sue letter. And so she's now beyond the statute of limitations, and she hasn't done what she needed to do as a condition precedent because she sued the wrong entity. She's going to make a counter argument. We've seen it kind of in correspondence that they cured that. I'm interested in seeing what that looks like. But this comes up again in this argument of the notice and cure. Because they're like, look, remember how I've talked about alter ego? I also have a video on alter ego in TikTok Law School. Go watch it if you want to know more about this. I was just at that Doechii concert. Alter ego. Anyway, I must have said that 35 times. So they're talking about how even if you gave notice, giving it to Wayfair is not sufficient of giving it to It Ends With Us LLC because they're two totally different companies. And they take this huge dig at Gottlieb without saying his name, because they say, let's just assume for the sake of argument that the cease and desist letter that was sent right before you filed in December of 2024 was your notice of breach. You sent it to the wrong entity. You didn't send it to It Ends With Us LLC. You sent it to Wayfair, which was wrong. And you filed your case 4 days later, which isn't 30 days. So even if you try to rely on that, you fuck that up. All right, fifth video, and I swear that's going to be it.